right, hi everyone. I hope you're still alive and well after a whole day and a half of conference already. So let me start by introducing myself and what I'm going to talk about. Who I am. So my name is Arnaud. I was born in Paris. I'm currently based in Amsterdam after a couple of years in San Francisco. And I have 2 young kids and 1 startup, which, I'm not going to lie, on certain days feels like either too many kids or too many startups. But that's what it is. In terms of my background, so I was one of the early employees at Docker. I was a core maintainer on the open source project, and I was also one of the first engineering managers on the company, managing the core team. So we called that maintaining the maintainers, essentially. And after that, I had the opportunity to join VP. So VP is a very large e-commerce player, which you may not know about in Germany, but it's really, really big in France and other countries. And I got the chance to lead an organization of 700-800 engineers. And that's a lot of what this talk is going to be about, sharing my learnings, my personal experience in this company, trying to measure and communicate the performance of my teams. Today, indeed, I am the founder of Echoes. It's my first company as a founder, and we have a booth here if you'd like to talk about it later. So let's get started. We are in 2017. I just got my job at VP, and congratulations, you're on the exec team. That's pretty cool, right? Because when you are in the career track of engineering management, that's pretty much the holy grail. It's where you want to be. So I was super happy I was on the exec team. And then the first executive committee happened, and it was an experience, I would say. It was different, not necessarily what I expected. The first thing that happened is that I was sitting at this table, and I saw our head of sales, our CFO, share some slides, share some data, very convincing data about the progress of their team and about everything that they were doing. And then we had the CMO, marketing, come up, share slides, pretty slides, of course, because it's marketing. And they had a lot of convincing data about everything that they were doing, and it was really awesome. And I had absolutely none of this. I had nothing. And even worse than this, I could really feel the weight of the expectations. We are in a time where there's no business results without tech. And that means that when you are sitting in executive committee, a lot of discussions are going to end up talking about tech. You're going to be at the crossroads of so many discussions, and you're going to have stakeholders looking at you asking, when do we ship? Can we do X? Can we do Y? When does it come out? You know, like me, that tech is complex, tech is chaotic, tech is somehow unpredictable, but the fact is, they don't care about this. They want to know when things actually come out, when things ship, and when we're going to actually deliver business value for the business. And that put me in a situation where I had to figure out what it is that I was going to tell them on a weekly basis, in the same way that the CFO and the CMO does, to communicate on our activity in a way that would make sense for them, and of course would feel comfortable for me in terms of what I wanted to be as a CTO. So what it is that I can share during a weekly meeting with my peers in the Exco. How do I communicate our activity with data and not just gut feelings? Because really the bulk of the issue here is that however competent I am as a CTO, if what I have are only gut feelings, then I'm just a guy with opinions, and that's just not going to cut it. I think we should be doing better. So any ideas? What should I share? What should I tell them? Any metrics, any numbers, any things that come to mind? Sorry, I heard something. Rollouts in production, that's a good idea, yeah. And I see a lot of CTOs doing that. Yeah, anything else? Technical debt, sorry, I heard something here also, no? Lead time, perfect, yeah, so, yeah. Things that are really about outputs and about how much we're producing. So I'm going to bundle this up into what I'm going to call productivity metrics. It's not just productivity metrics, but it's a lot of it. So DORA metrics, agile metrics, velocity, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think they're enough to capture the entirety of the success of an engineering organization. And I'm going to explain why. The first point is productivity is very rarely the bottleneck. I don't know about you, but personally, I have literally never felt so productive as a developer. We have today, we have access to the cloud. We have Docker. We have AI coding assistants. I mean, come on. I was literally capable of bootstrapping a company on my own, and I'm very far from being the best developer in the world. So there's an obsession right now about developer productivity, but I really don't think it's what we should be talking about the most. The second point is that productive metrics, they kind of send the wrong message. What I mean by this is that in my position as a CTO, I really strongly believe that being a CTO, a good CTO these days, is about caring beyond the code. It's about having an impact for your business. It's about moving the needle for your business. And the problem is, as soon as you start using productivity metrics as proxies for the success of your organization, you're kind of perpetuating the idea that your job is to put code into production, which I would agree is a fair part of the job, of course. But again, what we should be caring about is moving the needle for the business. And the last one, I'm going to put it very bluntly, but nobody cares. Nobody cares, especially not the people in the exco. That's not what they care about. Like, you're productive, good for you. But I mean, when do we ship? When do results happen? Productivity is not the goal, and productivity, of course, is important, but it's not going to matter to your stakeholders unless it translates into positive business outcomes. So taking a step back then, what are the components of engineering performance? What it is that I should be measuring, that I should be sharing, if I want to communicate what I believe is the performance of my engineering org. The very first part, and the key building block in my mind, is alignment. Are we even working on the right thing? So when I joined VP, the focus of the team was the main pain point. I could hear many teams tell me that they had just too much to do. I had people tell me that we were very good at starting things, but not so good at finishing them. I'm sure this is things you've heard already. Like, I see that in so many companies that we're working with and talking to today. It's probably the most common issue that I'm seeing in engineering orgs today. And so how do I make sure that my team is actually focused, and how do I get the data to show for it to my stakeholders? So we took on an exercise that started like most things in life start, which is with a spreadsheet. We created this spreadsheet where we said, well, in line, we're going to put the teams and the departments. In columns, we're going to have the goals. We're going to have the projects. We're going to go through each team, and that was very painful, but we had to do it. We're going to talk to each team, and we're going to ask them what it is that you're doing today. Not in terms of the roadmap, not in terms of the plan, just like what's keeping you busy right now, this week, or this month. Give us a rough idea of the big buckets of work. And as you can see, I'm not going to go into the details, but it's a very rough score to say, like, are you spending, like, 10% of your time on this, more than half of your time on that, and trying to map exactly what was the activity of the teams. This gave us a heat map of the activity, something that I could use not only to measure the focus, but most importantly, to communicate to my peers. As an example, when I joined the company, we had 5 company strategic pillars. How many columns do you think that we ended up with in this spreadsheet? 10? I love your optimism. Sorry? Minimum 10, yeah. No, we ended up with roughly 31, if I remember correctly, on the first time. So basically 5 company pillars, which were supposed to be the only thing that we were doing, and the 26 initiatives, important enough that they were worth mentioning in this document, and that were happening, that teams were working on. I cannot overstate how valuable this thing was for us, because what it allowed me to do is come to my CEO, come to the exco, and show them this is the reality of the allocation of the budget today. And the way I presented it is saying, well, our engineering org is a cake. This is right now how we are slicing it. We can disagree on the way that it's sliced. We can do different arbitrage. I don't have a magic wand, and I cannot grow the cake. So the only thing we can decide now is whether we should be doing different things, different arbitrages, or keep doing it this way. And it really put the finger on the spiral in which we were in. We were in a situation where there were frustrations due to a lack of delivery. And because of that, the stakeholders, they were just piling on more topics in hope that something, pretty much anything, comes out. But by doing so, they made the focus even worse, they hurt the delivery even more, rinse and repeat, and this is where we are with 26 initiatives on top of the 5 company priorities. But it really went a long way in building trust, because for the first time, we had this kind of transparency where we could say, look, this is not a tech problem, this is a company problem. We are in a situation here where this is not about us not delivering results. This is about the company collectively not agreeing on what truly matters. And there's a point that I really want to stress here, and why I believe alignment is so important to the organization. There's no amount of developer productivity or delivery performance that is going to fix this. Best case scenario, you're going to go faster on your 26th initiative, and you'll get the chance to get the 27th one. But that's not going to help in the long run. So there, this is how we really approach the alignment part and how we got better at prioritization. And then comes the question of delivery performance. Once you have clarity of goals, sure, now we can discuss how we're going to reach them faster, but that's not the starting point. You're all familiar now with DORA metrics, delivery performance metrics. I'm going to talk about specifically 2 learnings that I got from this experience and also mistakes that I made with them. The first thing I want to say is that those delivery performance metrics, they are really great at setting a baseline. I was in a situation where I joined after years of underinvestment on the tech part. And that means that's the nice way to say that we have 3 giant monoliths running the company and that nobody knows how to touch them anymore. And DORA metrics here are really great because they were a way for us to measure if the teams were regaining autonomy and ability to deliver progressively. When you are dealing with a transformation like this, it's not going to be binary. You're not going to have like one day you have the monolith and the next day the monolith is gone. And it doesn't really matter because ultimately what's important is not that the monolith is gone. What's important is that the teams have regained their ability to deliver value constantly and frequently for the business. And that's what the DORA metrics really gave us. However, there's one mistake that I made in the beginning and that I see many CTOs do also, which is that delivery performance metrics do nothing on their own. And assume, I hear a lot of talk about people that assume that, well, we're going to measure the DORA metrics, we're going to put them on a dashboard, high five, we're done. Nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. As an engineering leader, there's at least a couple things you have to figure out. One is, what are your expectations regarding those metrics? Like, do you want every team to improve on a monthly basis? Do you want to set a threshold and expect that this is the new norm for the organization? It's a complex discussion to have with the teams to figure out also what's most important for you. In our case, we really went with the basics. We decided to set a threshold on deployment frequency because this was the most important at this time, and that's it. But then the second thing you have to do when you have set those expectations is to actually help the team get there. You're going to be faced with teams that possibly have never heard about this kind of metrics, don't know what to do with them, and even if they understand the number and what it means, they don't necessarily know what's the lever for them to actually improve. And you cannot blame them, right? Because, I mean, it's not something that they should know necessarily. And I would say on this, you really need to provide support to help them match this expectation. It's probably a combination of different things. The way we approached it at VP was to say, well, it's going to be a combination of an internal platform that they can use to go to production more efficiently and safely, and coaching using staff engineers, which were not a role that existed when I originally joined, but which really helped in terms of evangelization and in terms of bringing the team up to speed in terms of what they could do differently to improve on the delivery performance. And there's one final thing I want to add on this. The teams who already know what to do to get better with delivery performance, they're not going to be your worst performers anyway. They already figured it out. They didn't wait for you to do things with modern best practices. So that's why you really need to provide assistance to the teams. Once we have talked about alignment and delivery performance, the truth is none of this matters unless the team is healthy and that you can produce sustainable results. And that ties back a bit to the panel that we had before about balancing productivity and well-being, right? What good are business results that you deliver on a regular basis if it comes at the expense of the team? You cannot have attracting talents and retention as a second thought. This has to be built from the ground, from the get-go, to make sure that you are actually doing things in a way that is sustainable for the teams. And this is also a part where data can help. So data can help in 2 ways. One is using quantitative data at the service of the team's health. one example we have with customers is, for example, noticing when there's patterns that are really unhealthy for a given contributor. When you see that somebody is just taking all the load of incidents, when you see that somebody is just working nights and weekends repeatedly and is putting his health at risk. The problem you have with this kind of people is that they're not going to be the ones who bring that up necessarily during the one-on-ones. They are your most committed contributors, they're your most engaged contributors, and they typically think that this is their mission, this is what they should be doing. And that's great, except they might put themselves at risk because they're just going too far. And unless you have the data to actually detect that those things are happening before it's too late, you might be in a situation where you're going to burn out your most engaged collaborators. The second part is qualitative data at the service of the team's health, and that's something that we've been talking about also during the conference. Surveys, understanding what is the pulse of the teams. Back at VP, I had the chance of having Office Vibe that was used throughout the company to do surveys and to do engagement reports. I was using them extremely frequently, even to get the pulse on specific topics, like, for example, having a specific survey on one given project to ask, do you have confidence that this is actually going to ship and this is going to actually be a success? Do you have confidence that this is the right thing to do for the company? And again, it's really about tying back into the mission of having an impact for the business and not just moving bits around and shipping code. So having said that, back to the executive committee. I'm in the room, everybody's looking at me, when do we ship? So, again, it's the only thing that matters to stakeholders. And so far what we've covered is I have visibility into the team's focus. I can tell, and I have the data to show for it, that we are working on the right things. We are measuring delivery performance, so I know what to expect from the teams. I know what is typically our pace of development. We have confidence that the team is engaged. We have confidence that the team is solid. What is it that I'm missing? Any ideas? No? Sorry, go ahead. Your end users? Business impact? Yeah, so that's absolutely true. I wish this was my answer, actually. But this is the one that you will have with the peers in the executive committee. I think what we're missing right now to answer, like when do we ship and whether we're actually on track, is execution tracking. So having feedback loops into the execution to know what's going well and what's not going well. My point here is that all the things that I discussed before, they're never a given. And engineering success is never a done deal, essentially. It's both bad news, because it means that it's not something that you can just fix and move forward. It's also great news, because it's what makes the job really fascinating. Everything is always going to change. The alignment that you thought you had yesterday is maybe entirely gone to a super important priority that comes from sales or from a major production incident. Maybe the delivery performance that you had last month is entirely gone due to a project that you shipped, and you created a dependency between teams that didn't exist before and putting you in a rough spot. So everything is going to change constantly. The only question becomes, how fast are you actually aware of those changes, and how fast can the organization react? And this ties back into feedback loops. I think feedback loops is really one of the most difficult roles for the CTO. Figuring out exactly how we want to get the information from the field to know that the things are doing are actually the right things, and that minimizing surprises, essentially. I'll give you a couple examples of what I mean by feedback loops and the one that I see most commonly. The first is a quote that I want to use from Nagy, who is the CTO of a French unicorn called Miracle. Nagy was telling me, in an ideal world, I would like to participate in the stand-up of all of my teams. And this guy has 40 teams. Of course, he's not going to do it. But you get the message here. He would like to be able to hear everything that is happening on the field before it's too late, before waiting for the next, the next 1.1 or the next status update. Another example that I heard from Jean-Baptiste Kempf, who you probably know as the founder of VLC, but he also is the CTO for a European cloud provider called Scaleway. So the way he approaches this is by having monthly team reviews. So on a monthly basis, reviewing the metrics, reviewing the goals, and having a discussion with the team, but also having every week a 4-liner that the teams have to send that are automatically consolidated into the PDF, which is sent to the whole company. So it's just 4 lines, but it's 4 lines that every team is sending on a weekly basis. This is just an example of how those people approach staying connected to the execution to make sure that everything is still on track. But probably the most common thing that I'm seeing in terms of feedback loops, and that I'm sure a lot of you are doing, is just Jira tickets, right? Jira tickets is one very common form of feedback loop. It's one of those things that a lot of companies mandate from the teams because they want this kind of traceability and this kind of visibility into what's happening. And I think it's important to understand this as a feedback loop because then you can start questioning whether it's a good feedback loop or not. And what makes a good feedback loop? Well, a good feedback loop is one that is short, meaning that whenever something happens, you are aware fast, sooner rather than later. The second one is, does it actually take time for the team? Is it actually costly for the team to do? When we are asking them for status updates, monthly reviews, four-liners, etc., we're asking them for work that primarily benefit us. And that's something that I think is super important to keep in mind. Ultimately, this is something that you're doing mostly for your own needs. And yes, it is a forcing function. It is interesting for the teams also to take a step back and to think about how they're doing and what is truly their status. But still, it's mostly something that you're doing for you, and that means that you have to be very considerate in what you're asking. And most importantly, is it a useful feedback loop? Are you doing anything with the data that the teams are producing? And I think this is typically a case where what I'm seeing in the industry regarding tickets and tracing and tracking and this kind of stuff is not necessarily always true. A lot is being asked on the team, not so much is being used afterwards in the data to actually make decisions. I think that once you have this kind of habit of measuring things, measuring alignment, measuring delivery performance, there's a lot you can do to actually get very efficient feedback loops that tell you when things are off track before you actually wait for the next 1-1 or the next team review. You can tell through the alignment metrics when there's a team that got entirely sidetracked and is working on something different. You can tell sometimes with the DORA metrics when a project is just unusually slow compared to the regular pace of the team, and that should be signals that you use. So closing thoughts. Steering an engineering organization is a lot like steering a boat. You need to keep an eye on the basics. You need to see, you need to know the weather, you need to know the wind, you need to know if the engine is doing well. You need to care for the crew. You want to avoid mutiny. You want to make sure that the people are actually healthy and safe on board. You need to stay on course. You have a goal and you have to get there. But last but not least, you have to get there in time, because if what you're carrying are winter coats, nobody's going to celebrate if you arrive in the spring. So thank you so much for your attention. I'm very passionate about this topic, so please add me on LinkedIn. Tell me if you agree, tell me if you disagree. Let's chat about this. Again, Echoes, we have a booth here. I'd love to show you a demo of what we're building. I'd love to continue the conversation, and you have a chance to win a Lego. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Arnaud. We're a bit out of time.